Hi everyone, it's Melissa, and today I am going to share what I read in January. I want to get this out not too late in the month of February, and in order to be able to do that, I don't really have much time to edit. So hopefully I can summarize my thoughts coherently so that I can do minimal editing. So I'm going to go chronologically with what I read, and I started the year off with Redshirts by John Scalzi, and this is a comedy sci-fi. It is kind of a parody, or it uses the tropes of science fiction and kind of plays around with that in a really fun way. So if you're familiar with the term red shirts, is talking about those ensigns or those characters in sci-fi shows, particularly Star Trek, who were always killed off when they went on an away mission, just to show that the situation was serious because they were basically expendable. And the rank in Star Trek was that the ensigns, the lowest rank, were wearing red shirts. So the term red shirts kind of alludes to the lowest ranking personnel that you can kind of kill off in a show. And this book follows red shirts in a way. It follows the low ranking personnel. It's from their perspectives. We particularly follow one ensign, Andrew Dahl. And I don't want to say too much about this because I think there's a lot of fun elements that can be surprising. It is funny, but I was expecting this to just be an out and out comedy, and that would be that. It would be a fun read. It was very much a fun read, but I found myself towards the end, even though this is very much a tongue-in-cheek kind of book, really caring about the characters and rooting for them and wanting them to be safe. So what's happening is basically a few of the ensigns, and well, the personnel on the ship in general, have noticed that they're always the ones to die, that the ensigns are always the ones to die, and it kind of goes through their process of finding out what's going on. Is there some sort of conspiracy? Like, why do the ensigns keep dying? And we follow all these ensigns who are desperate to figure this out because they don't want to be the next one to die horribly on some alien planet. So this was just, I thought, so much more than I expected it to be, or that it could have been. It could have been a very simple parody using these tropes, but I thought it really made you feel for the characters. I think it could have been really easy to make the characters very one-dimensional, but I thought that the characters kind of came to life. So yeah, I thought I would like this, but I didn't know I would like it as much as I did. So we were off to a pretty strong start with Red Shirts. Unfortunately, or actually no, the next book that I read was not the unfortunately. We'll save that till next. The next book I read was the best thing I read during the month of January, and that was Run Towards the Danger by Sarah Polley. She is a director. She was an actor, a child actor, and she acted a little bit into adulthood. And she also writes and directs. She directed Women Talking, which, and she wrote the screenplay for it, which she won an Oscar for. But I always knew her growing up as Sarah Stanley from the Road to Avonlea series. So this is a series set in Avonlea, where Anne of Green Gables comes from. And it has some of the same characters from the town, but it doesn't follow Anne. Anne is not really in the series, but it follows these other families in Avonlea. It was my favorite show as a child. I watched it religiously. I loved it. Now, the experience of being a child actor was very different for Sarah Polley than it was for all of the kids like me who love to watch it. This is a memoir that is, I guess maybe you could call it an essay collection. I typically don't get along with most essay collections, but this one, I think, even though each essay was about a different facet of her life, I think she really blended those themes together really well, so I saw it more as a whole memoir. She talks, so there are a couple of essays dealing with her time as a child actor. One focuses, talks a little bit about being on Road to Avonlea, but mostly focuses on her time as one of the leads in a movie by Terry Gilliam that I can't remember the name of, something Mon von Baron von Munchausen or something like that. I can't remember. The Adventures of Baron von Munchausen. I had never watched it, but she was the lead, or one of the leads in that movie, and hearing her talk about her experience on that movie set, the good about it, the good about working with Terry Gilliam, and also the bad, and how her safety wasn't really considered, and how adults in her life really failed her through that process, and how she tries to steer, quote unquote stage parents away from that, and how they don't want to hear it, that people are so invested in their child who they think is talented, being the next big thing, that even when they hear from a former child actor that they shouldn't do it, they disregard that. I thought that was a really interesting section of the book. She also talks about her experience with sexual assault, and this was, I think, right before the Me Too movement, when allegations had come to light against Jian Ghomeshi, who was the former host of a very popular radio show on CBC in Canada. And she talks about her experience and her decision to not come forward, and how she felt about that during everything that went on, and after. That was fascinating. Just a lot of different aspects of her life, and each one was interesting in very different ways, but it did complete this whole picture of who she is as a person, and how her experiences shaped her. And yeah, I thought it was just excellent. You don't have to be really a fan of hers, I think, to get something out of this book. She did a great amount of reflection, which always makes for a great memoir, in my opinion. The next read was not so fantastic, and I'm so bummed about this because I really wanted to like this. It's Axioms End by Lindsay Ellis. This is science fiction. It's a first contact story. I love Lindsay Ellis's video essays. I rewatch quite a few of them periodically just because I think they're so well done. I especially love the one she did breaking down the making of the Hobbit movies, the recent ones by Peter Jackson, and kind of what happened with those movies. And just I just love her video essays. I think she's a great video essayist. So I was really excited to read her debut novel, and I just really disliked it, unfortunately. We follow a main character who is, I don't know if they give her age, maybe she's around 19 or 20. She's basically just dropped out of college. Her father, she hasn't seen in years. He is kind of like almost like a WikiLeaks kind of guy. He runs this page called, I think it's called The Broken Seal. He leaks government documents, and he has leaked documents that seem to indicate that the government has been in contact with some sort of aliens. And there are these events, a couple of events that happen, which, if memory serves, the media / the government is saying like a couple meteors hit, but we're led to believe that these are aliens landing. And our main character, Cora, becomes kind of sucked into the center of this against her will, because she doesn't want anything to do with any of this. She has very strong feelings against her father, and him basically abandoning his family to leak documents. She doesn't think much of him. And I think the premise, it could have gone somewhere really interesting. Unfortunately, I think there wasn't enough done, first of all, with the whole leaked documents thing, her relationship with her father. I think Ellis was trying to do something around that, but I think it kind of just fell flat. It didn't really pull the story together in any way. I thought the main character of Cora was frustrating and not in an interesting way. She just was like one of the main characters you just don't want to read about. She didn't seem to have much agency. Things just kind of happened to her. More than that, I think more importantly than that, the author made the kind of alien backstory, the alien society, um, so complicated. And she's trying to say a couple things in here about how, an alien civilization would be so foreign to us that we wouldn't be able to understand it. There's a lot in here with Cora and like other characters, like alien characters, like not getting each other. And like I can see what Ellis was going for, but it didn't land because yes, if you want to have your aliens seem very alien, then they can't seem too close to human civilization in terms of their beliefs and their biology and everything. But she added so many layers of complexity that it made it impossible for me to know what was going on. Like there's a whole kind of hierarchical like caste structure to the alien society, and she kept adding so many layers to this and so much terminology that I never knew what she was talking about. Like, it just made it too hard to get into. But I think the biggest problem I had with this book is I just didn't think the writing was very good. I think Ellis has a lot of like big ideas and that just were not executed in the plotting of it, in the pacing of it, and in the writing. Like the dialogue's very like just the dialogue's weird. Whenever someone's talking, it doesn't sound like how people would ever talk. And yeah, it was just a little cringy in places. So anyway, I won't be continuing on. There's more in this series, but I think that one was enough for me. But we ended on a good note. I read, the last thing I read in January was The Sisters Brothers by Patrick deWitt. This was not at all what I was expecting. I didn't know much about it except that it's a Western and that it was a comedy or that it was funny, at least in some way. And yes, it is a Western. And yes, there is like a layer of comedy to this. But it's also very dark. There are some gruesome scenes in here. Like, if you have a problem with bad things happening to animals, like, be forewarned. Also just gross things happening to people, but the animal scenes were quite disturbing. It's about two characters, but it's from the point of view of one of these brothers. So it's Charlie and Eli sisters, the Sisters Brothers. And they are basically assassins, I guess. They are hired guns. They work for a man called the Commodore, and at the start of the novel, you learn that they have been tasked, hired to go to California, or go to somewhere in California, San Francisco, maybe? Somewhere, doesn't really matter. And find a man called Worm, and kill him because he has stolen something from the Commodore. So that's what they're doing. They are traveling, so it's very kind of like Western in that traveling across the landscape, and it has a lot of Western tropes. I'm not really up to date on all the Western tropes, but even I could pick out these Western tropes. But deWitt really plays around with them in very interesting and unexpected ways. I mean, we have gold rush and prospectors and like traveling the landscape. We have like guns and action and all that stuff, and kind of even the characters kind of fall within these things that could be tropey, but he does interesting things with them. The one point of view we have is from Eli, and he's the younger brother, and we kind of see the dynamic between the two brothers and how that came to be. As you read on, you kind of learn more about their backstory, and you really get to understand them. And it was just so interesting like following people that, I mean, they're villains, right? But you just, especially Eli, like Charlie's a little harder to like. You kind of, well, at least I didn't really feel any strong attachment to Charlie, but there was just like a kernel of goodness at the center of Eli that even though he is clearly a bad guy, you just want good things for him. So I thought the character work was really interesting. I want to talk though about like the comedy in this, and that it wasn't what I was expecting. So everyone talks about like how funny it is, and yes, there are funny bits, but I was expecting it to be a comedy with maybe some like undercurrents of like dark western. But I think it's actually the reverse. And it felt very much like a Coen Brothers film. And at first I was thinking like, oh, it kind of reminds me of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Because this also has the feel of like a Greek tale, like like the Odyssey, where you're traveling and meeting these weird characters, like you're meeting a an oracle or what, there's no oracles in this, but in this book they meet an old woman that they kind of call a witch, and they meet these other characters kind of along the way, so it has that kind of Greek um, myth feel to it, just like or Oh Brother Where Art Thou, which if you're not familiar, that film is based around the Odyssey very heavily. Um, so at first I kind of felt like, oh, this feels like Oh Brother. They're like traveling, they're meeting these weird characters, and it's funny. But as I read on, it's like, Oh Brother Where Art Thou is mostly funny, I feel, with some undercurrent of dark. Whereas this I feel is the reverse. I feel this is mostly dark with an undercurrent of comedy. That's how it read to me, which I think aligns more with something like Fargo. Fargo has a very different feel in terms of setting and stuff than this book, but the tone of it, like Fargo is a very uh, mostly dark story, but with this undercurrent of comedy that runs through the whole thing with a lot of funny scenes, but overall the story is very dark. So it kind of had that feel to it. Just tonally very interesting. And if you've read it, I'd like to know your opinion about the tone, because everyone else seems to find it funny with a dark edge, whereas I found it dark with a funny edge. So if you've read it, please let me know your thoughts. If you've read any of these books, please let me know what you think in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll chat soon. Take care. Bye.